I worked in the Ministry of Foreign Trade for 1 year. I was not satisfied with the environment that prevailed. There was too little emphasis on serious analytical work and too much of politicking. So I resigned from the ministry. Mr. P.N. Haksar was then the principal secretary to the Prime Minister. He called me and he said, "We are not going to let you go back to Delhi School of Economics, and if whatever your grievance, we will make sure that you are promoted and made Chief Economic Advisor to the government." And there was a vacancy, and therefore I became the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India in 1972. As Chief Economic Advisor in 72, I came to the Ministry of Finance, and in a short period of time, there was elections in 1971 and 72, state elections. Mr. P.N. Haksar asked me, "What do you think we should be doing?" And there is one paper which is missing in this that I wrote at that time, "Victory, what to do with it?" And in that paper that I wrote, I said the victory of the Congress party in the elections in 1971 and 72 is a rare occasion to use politics as an instrument of economic and social change. And I outlined a broad strategy. One of the two papers, I believe Jairam Ramesh has been able to dig out, but this basic paper, what to do with victory, is somehow not available, and that's not included here. But that was my first big introduction to the world of politics. I worked very closely with Shri Y.B. Chavan, and through Mr. P.N. Haksar, I had ample opportunities to interact with the then Prime Minister, Srimati Indira Gandhi. People say she was very haughty. My experience of dealing with Indira ji was she was always very receptive to new ideas, and particularly technological thought processes where she herself said that she was not very knowledgeable. She listened to expert advice in depth. In 73, the country was in the midst of a 30% inflation rate, and Mrs. Gandhi in Bangalore made a speech that we need a man who is a great expertise to solve the inflation problem that was hurting the country. And when she came back, there was a cabinet meeting, and she asked me what were my thoughts about the control of inflation. And I said, "Madam, my feeling is if we learn to convert good economics into good politics, that would be the first essential thing for controlling inflation." And then Mrs. Gandhi said, "What exactly do you mean?" She turned to Mr. Pandey, who was the cabinet secretary, and she said I should work with the cabinet secretary and Professor P.N. Dhar to produce a paper, which I did produce, and the government made use of that paper to outline an inflation control strategy. That's how I made my name with Indira ji. She was so impressed, and that's where Mr. P.N. Haksar helped me to make my mark in the Ministry of Finance. I worked very closely with Sri C. Subramaniam, and as Finance Minister, Mr. C. Subramaniam was a usually unorthodox man. Never before a finance minister at the budget time thought of producing a paper on strategies for rural development. C. Subramaniam said we should do that, in the Ministry of Finance, there was a lot of people who said, no, this is not done, this is not our terrain, but we went ahead, and that paper itself was a very influential paper in outlining new way of thinking about rural and agricultural development. In the 70s, inflation control and the management of the balance of payments in the wake of the first oil crisis were the most important policy issues with which I was deeply involved. And then came the emergency. I was appointed secretary to the Ministry of Finance by Indiraji. When the emergency was over, there was pressure on Morajibai that I should be removed because I was too close to Indiraji. But Mr. H.M. Patel, who was the finance minister, he remembered the letter that Nicholas Caldor had written to T.T. Krishnamachari. And he said, no, Prime Minister, I know Manmohan Singh for a long time, and he will be able to work with us without any difficulty. And the result was that I was one of the few secretaries in the government of India who kept his job despite change of government. When Mrs. Gandhi came back, she again called me the day she was making a speech to the nation and showed me a draft. And in that speech, there were some things which I felt were not correct. And one of these was that the Janta government had made a mess of the foreign exchange situation. I pointed out to the Prime Minister that, Madam, you may have other grievances, but the Janta government has left you with a hefty foreign exchange situation. And therefore, she, in her own hand, made corrections in this speech. Such was the greatness of the Prime Minister that she did not discourage free thinking, provided one had no axe to grind. And I had the privilege of working with Indiraji, and when she came back, she said, I should go to the Planning Commission. Mr. T.N. Kaul was then close to Indiraji. He suggested that I should become the Planning Commission minister. I was called by Indiraji, and I said, Madam, I cannot afford to lose my job because I have no pension, and if you send me to the Planning Commission as minister or as deputy chairman, I will have to resign from the civil service, and that would mean that I would lose pension. So Mrs. Gandhi said, well, so what is the way out?